welcome back to Ministry to Muslims. I'm your host this evening, Brother Terence, and with me today we have Brother Stephen Atkins. Way back in June, we hosted a Ministry to Muslims conference back in Minnesota called Making Jesus Known 2025, and it was our pleasure to have Brother Stephen with us then. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here today and to see you again after a few months of not seeing you. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, okay, yeah. My name is Steve.
And how you got into talking.
Yeah, this is a bit new to me. I haven't done, I think this is the first live stream I've done in a number of years, and they were debates the last time. Well, my name is Stephen Atkins, and I live in Toronto, Canada, so it's Go Blue Jays for now. And I've been involved in Muslim ministry since 1973. I was with Operation Mobilization. I went out to Iran and spent a year in Iran, and was on a men's traveling team. When I came back to Canada, we did, settled down, got married, and had kids. But in the meantime, we did Muslim outreach in Toronto, and there are maybe 300,000, 400,000 Muslims living in the Greater Toronto area. And currently, I am involved in, we do a lot of mosque visits and connecting with Muslims. Next week or next month, we're going to be talking to a Muslim on the deity of Christ. So is there anything else you need to know about me? I'm an old man, I'm a grandpa, okay?
Well, great. Yeah, no, that's a good start. I guess in your times you've had many interesting interactions with Muslims. What's something that draws you back into engaging with Muslims and having conversations with them?
Well, I this is a bit subjective. I felt since I was in Bible college that this was my calling, that my primary interest has been in Islam. There's other areas of ministry that other people have, and which are important. I think that, and we're called to preach Christ. And I think that it's unfortunate that most people don't know how to really engage in talking to Muslims. We all have our stereotype. I was talking to Clinton, and we were thinking of maybe doing a video on asking people what is a Muslim or what is Islam, and see, we see a picture. Some Muslims are very secular. Some Muslims we see or you can tell the Muslims by the way they dress, and we almost, but what's going on inside that person? And right now I think we need to there's a couple of levels. We need to be as wise as wise as serpents, as harmless as doves. And that I think also too is that we have to be aware of what is happening with Muslim immigration into the West. I mean, Terence, I saw what happened. I saw what it was like in Minneapolis, and there's and their voice is getting stronger and stronger here in Canada, and I'm not too sure where it's going to go from now. I want to have a balancing where I'm not fearful, but I want to be aware. But we need to engage in talking and learning to listen. But also, I think we have to we have to proclaim Christ.
Absolutely, yeah, and both Minneapolis and Toronto. There's many hundreds of thousands of Muslims between the two, and And typical, the task is large, the topic right, but the workers are few.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm just going to close the door here so that.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Stephen is going to be talking today on an important topic that every so often comes up when speaking to Muslims, the topic of the sign of Jonah and how to explain that.
Okay, well, let's see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see if we can pull this up here. No, you guys are going to have to tell me what you see, because when I pull this up, I'm not going to be able to see what's happening here. So, okay, oops, well, there we go. So what do you see now?
You might want to maximize the screen there.
Yeah,
Stephen.
okay, but you see the PowerPoint presentation, right?
I can. It's yeah, it's a bit small, so.
Okay, no, just a minute. I just wanted to see. Okay, slideshow.
That's great.
Okay, so we're
Okay, I'll
well.
give it over to you now.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this PowerPoint presentation. I gave it. I presented it in Minneapolis, and we're going to take about maybe half an hour just to go through it. And what I want to do is do it in two parts, because there's two questions that you often see when that Muslims ask when they talk about the sign of Jonah. So basically, it's answering Muslim objections, the sign of Jonah, and of course we can quote from Matthew. This is their go-to passage, and the context is Jesus is with having an argument with the Pharisees, and and the Pharisees are demanding a sign. And so if we go to Matthew 12, and I love reading the scriptures, and I love reading the scriptures in the context. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered and said to him, "Teacher, we want for you to see a sign." But he answered and said to them, "An evil and adulterous generation eagerly seeks for a sign, yet no sign will be given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the
I'm
earth."
sorry to bother you, Stephen. You've got a little a StreamYard message in the middle of your presentation.
Okay.
If you can move that, you can hide
Can I
it.
hit the hide?
Yeah, try clicking hide. That's great.
Okay. Like I say, I'm just learning this, so there could be a few glitches along the way. Okay, so the sign of Jonah, part 1, and this is an introduction about how I'm trying to approach scripture. And one of them is basically we very often we don't know how to read scripture. We read it basically from our through our a Western 21st century lens, rather than allowing, rather than understanding that the New Testament and the Old Testament were ancient documents, and they had a different language, they had a different culture, and what I found that quite helpful in beginning to understand the scriptures is trying to understand how the ancients understood the text. I don't know, some of you may have heard the phrase, the Bible wasn't written to us, but it was written for us. And I can give you an example. When Paul was writing to Timothy, he talks about, bring my cloak, and his coats, and the parchments. Well, that's for us, but it's not specifically to us. It was written to Timothy. So, we need to, we read the Bible basically through our post-enlightenment filters. We are, very often we're products of not only our Western culture, but we've also become, products of the Enlightenment, and therefore anything in the supernatural is, we don't think that way, and we need to learn to read the and I believe context is king. So we look at the context, but we look at it, you know, basically the Old Testament in its own context. And so we look at the intellectual and worldview and their environment. We look at basically the ancient Near East, Semitic world, and the New Testament in its own context. The Old Testament is in its original context. It's Second Temple literature. The second, and that's a bit different from, you know, modern, rabbinic Judaism. And we look at basically, Hellenistic. It was Hellenistic and also was Greco-Roman. And so sometimes we need to just, do a little bit of homework when we were looking at that to understand exactly how these people thought. And of course, we have also, as the ancient A&E, which is the ancient Near East. I been reading some stuff by Dr. Michael Heiser, which I know he's controversial with some people, but well, I think we have to honor the supernatural worldview of Scripture and how these people again were thinking. And I want to share this again. This is a quote that I picked up. Each biblical document and each part of a biblical document must be studied in its context, both its immediate, literary, and wider situation in which it appeared. This calls for the following elements. Biblical languages now. I know a bit of Greek, and I shared with Olin, I know just enough Greek to get me into a lot of trouble, but you don't need to know, Greek or Hebrew, but know how to use the tools that very often when you look at a specific word or something like that. Types of literature represented. There's difference between historical narrative and poetry, and something that is didactic or teaching. The historical background and geography and life setting. What was going on, with the lives of these people at that time. And it's interesting. God did not create a new culture for Israel that was foreign to the rest of the world. Need to look at that to understand that these were one of my rules for biblical interpretation was what was the writer's original intent. What was he, and what would those people have understood? We'll go on to the next one. So the sign of Jonah. And the first question we get from our Muslims was, Jonah dead or alive in the belly of the sea monster? I should take a poll, but we'll do that afterwards. Okay, so our first objection was dead or alive. Now I'm going to see if this works, I hope. If this doesn't work, just tell me, but this is our good friend Ahmadidat. And look what he has to say.
So then I would have asked you, was he dead or was he alive? And unanimous, 100% you would have shouted, alive. Because the man volunteered. When he volunteers, you don't have to maltreat him. Do you? No. So he was alive. Right answer. Right answer. Any child would have answered that. The fish comes and gobbles him. Dead or alive? Alive. Let me hear again from you all. Alive. Yes, yes. From the fish's belly, he prays to God for help. Do dead people pray? Do dead people plead with God? Do they? No. So what was he? Dead or alive? Alive. He's alive. He's alive. Alive. On the third day, the fish vomits him on the seashore. Dead or alive? Alive. And it is the mightiest miracle in the whole Bible. This is the mightiest miracle of all in the Bible. This is a miracle 3 times over. You see, when you throw a man into a raging sea, he ought to drown. He had to die. If he died, it's not a miracle. A fish comes and gobbles the man. A fish is not a respecter of person. He says, you know, you are Jonah, you are a prophet of God. Gently, gently. No fish will ever do that. You know, a fish gets a bait, big bait, big. That's going to have a big bite. You'll kill the man. If he died by the fish, it's not a miracle. It's not a miracle. If he didn't die, it's a miracle. Heat and suffocation in the whale's belly. 3 days and 3 nights, he ought to die. He ought to die. If he died, it's not a miracle. But he's alive. Third day, he goes into the sea alive. He comes out alive. Nowhere does it say he died in between and he was resurrected. Nowhere that he died and was resurrected. He's alive, 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 alive. And what did Jesus say? He said, for as Jonah was, so shall the Son of Man be. The miracle of Jonah is that he's alive 3 times over. When we expect him to be dead. When we expect the man to be dead, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. Jesus, he said, my miracle is the miracle of Jonah. Now, I'm asking the Christians that Jonah was alive for 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly. Everybody's agreed. And I'm asking the Christian that Jesus, for the same period of time, was he dead or was he alive? According to your church. According to your church, according to 1,500,000,000 Christians, according to you and me, Jonah was alive for 3 days and 3 nights, and Jesus for 3 days and 3 nights, was he dead or was he alive? Dead. He was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. I am asking the Englishman, please, sir, tell me in your language. Jonah is alive, Jesus is dead. Is that like Jonah or unlike Jonah in your language? No, it's your language. Look, you people taught me English. The Britisher. He conquered my country, India. He ruled my country, India, for 150 years. And I was born a British subject. And I carry a British passport, 69-year-old. A passport which is 69-year-old. I'm 78 now. 69-year-old passport I got. And I was telling people in London, in the Royal Albert Hall, that I'm more British than most of you. Because which guy is at that time about 65. I got a British passport of 65 years old. How many of you are 65 years old? So I've been a Britisher for 65 years then. I'm a Britisher with a British passport. And you people taught me English. So I'm asking the Englishman, in your language, is this like Jonah or unlike Jonah? Thank you. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. It's unlike Jonah. So, if he's unlike Jonah, then either he was bluffing the people. No, it's Jesus. He is telling he will be like Jonah, and you are telling that he was unlike Jonah. So either he was lying, bluffing, deceiving the people, or you have misunderstood. One of the two. Either he was lying, he was bluffing his way through, or you have misunderstood. Tell me, which is it? Either he was lying, or you have misunderstood. So then I would have asked you, was he?
Okay, so our friend Ahmed Didat fails to understand the Hebrew Semitic worldview. Do you see what the argument is? What the argument basically is that Jonah was alive in the belly of the fish, and Jesus was dead in the heart of the earth. But what Didat argues was basically in some type of swoon theory, and you'll hear this from Muslims. So you'll get this if I've gotten this question from Muslims a number of times on the Sign of Jonah. But we have to understand, we're going to understand. Previously, I showed slides basically looking at Hebrew cosmology. How do these people think? So cosmology refers to the way we understand the structure of the universe. We all think this way. We think, again, very modern way, but those people didn't. They had a very different view of the world order than we do. We don't need this one here. But I want to let's look at this for a moment. This slide here, the Bible and the three-tier universe. You have basically the heavens, the firmament, then you have the earth, and then at the bottom of the slide you will see the underworld. And the underworld was the realm of the dead. So this is a little bit better, maybe it'll help you out a bit. The heavens, the earth, and the underworld. And we're going to look at, for most part, the underworld. Now, of course, the sky was thought to be a solid firmament, and the earth was, and then we look at when he established the heavens and the earth. I was there, and of course, this is the part of the story of creation, creation in Proverbs, and okay, here we go. Here's another one. So this was basically how the ancients viewed the world. And again, you can see the abyss down at the very bottom. So again, we need to, familiarize ourselves with basically how the ancients viewed the world. So we're going to take a look at this. Okay, when was Jonah written? Well, it was written in the reign of Jeroboam, around 793 to 78, and he was to 781 BC. This is when he was king. Jonah had a prophetic ministry. That was around 760, and then of course Israel, the northern kingdom, fell in 712. So we can take a look at the. You know what, guys? One of my confessions is I've always loved maps. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved maps. So you can see basically the Middle East. Babylon is down in the southeast, and in the northeast is Assyria, and then you have, the Mediterranean, and so Nineveh is a long way from the Mediterranean. So going my way, going to go to Nineveh or going to go to Tarshish? Tarshish was the western extremity. That was to the ancients, that was the end of the world. Now let's look at this. Let's start reading the scriptures. Now the word of Yahweh came to Jonah, the son of Amittai. Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, call out against it, for the evil that has come up before me. Yet Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of Yahweh. He wanted to get out of, he wanted to get away from Yahweh. And he went down to Joppa, found a ship which was going to Tarshish, and paid his fare, and went down, went into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence. And so Jonah is running away. Now, you have to understand is the Assyrians were the really bad guys. And in fact, the Assyrians were, they were horrible. When they raided a village, they would take the women captive. The pregnant women, they would very often rip open their bellies and take the babies and smash their heads against the walls, and they were just brutal oppressors. And so there's no really love lost between the Jews of this time and the Assyrians. And here's another map. You can see where Nineveh, Nineveh is, or the Assyrians. You can see where Joppa is, and you can see Tarshish is all the way to Spain. So let's go back. And so they lifted Jonah up and hurled him into the sea, and the sea stood still from its raging, and then the men greatly feared Yahweh, and they offered up sacrifices to Yahweh and made vows. And Yahweh appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the stomach of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And here's the passage in full. I don't know that I can read all of this, but take your time when we're finished this to read the second chapter of Jonah. And then, of course, Jonah prayed to Yahweh, and he was expelled from the fish stomach and said, okay, I called to the Lord out of my distress to Yahweh, and he answered me. I cried from the belly of, what's the word here? Sheol. Sheol was the realm of the dead. You heard my voice. You cast me into the deep. Again, if you remember our slides that we showed earlier, this idea that into the heart of the seas, and the currents surrounded me. And so Jonah is down into the very depths, into the very bowels of the earth. So I said, I have been driven away from your sight. Nevertheless, I will look again to your holy temple. Waters encompassed me to my very soul. The great deep surrounded me. Again, this is the language of the dead, of being in the very depths of the earth, and the weeds wrapped around me. I went down to the base of the mountains. Remember our diagram earlier where we saw the mountains that were down basically again to where Sheol was, the realm of the dead. But you, O Lord, brought up my life from the pit. Again, language of death. O Yahweh, my God, when my soul was fainting within me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer came to you and to your holy temple. And those who regard worthless idols forsaken their loving kindness. But as for me, I will sacrifice to you with a voice of thanksgiving, that I may that which I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to Yahweh. So Yahweh speaks to the fish and vomits Jonah up on the dry land. And the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Arise and go to Nineveh, the great city. I'll call out to the very call where I'm going to speak to you. Jonah was saved from death. I see a typo. Okay. Jonah was saved from death when the fish vomited him up. And Jesus was saved from death by his resurrection from the dead. Okay, and of course we have basically the days of his flesh. So that's it. And I, for this part, and I think we'll do part 2 the next time. What I would like to do is just maybe we can have a bit of a discussion here on what you all think. My personal opinion is basically it really doesn't matter whether Jonah had physically died or not, but I think that when we read the narrative, I lean towards that he actually had died, but I don't think that that is so important. Is basically this is the language of death, and Jesus and Jonah was in the realm of the death, and he was raised by, and it's a type of resurrection by his when the fish vomited him up, and he's being recommissioned regarding that. So, okay, I've I've given you some of my thoughts. What do you all think?
Yes, thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. And yeah, we're just now bringing in our panel once again, and I'll just do a brief introduction of everybody. And to the top left, we have Pastor Olin Giles, who's with Radical Truth, engaging Muslims all around the US and in person and sharing the gospel with them. Our sister on the bottom right, Dewi Bulan, who's a former Muslim from Indonesia and now a follower of Christ. And she's got a great testimony and story to share for people to check out. Sister Alyssa, who writes books to help equip the church to deal with, amongst other things, the challenge of Islam and how to share with Muslims, and Sister Karen, who's in doing her best to engage and wake up the church over in West Canada. Yeah, so Stephen, with this question of the Sign of Jonah, do you find it comes up much in your discussions with Muslims?
I think they use it basically as I'll tell you a story that maybe they agree. I had a dialogue with Shabir Ali about 5, 6, 7 years ago in his mosque, and we talked about whether or not and it was with Shabir. It was on it was a dialogue on whether the the Holy Spirit, did Jesus prophesy another prophet or the coming of the Holy Spirit? And one of the Muslim women whom I'm well acquainted with, and Tabasan, and she's she just brought that question up out of the blue, and after that I've seen it more. It's sort of the followers of Ahmadiyyat where you get this question, and it's obvious that Ahmadiyyat had no knowledge of the Old Testament. And again, what the argument is, because Didat believes that Jesus, as does Shabir, that Jesus was actually nailed to the cross, but he didn't die. And what Didat argues is, well, Jonah was alive, and therefore Jesus must have been alive. That's basically the crux of the argument. But of course, what I think is basically is that when we look at the language in chapter 2 and look at basically how the ancients viewed the world, like what their view of cosmology, then that when you look at that, that's the language of death. To be in the belly of the earth, to be down at the base of the mountains, to be in Sheol, and Sheol was for the ancients, not only for not only for the Jews, but for those people living around them. That was the realm of the dead. If you were there, if you were in Sheol, you were there, and there was no escape. You weren't getting out.
Can I just ask a quick question? Was that you've given us lots to think about. What do you find that Muslims, because you've spoken to them a lot more than I have on some of these topics, what do you think most Muslims think the purpose of the story is? Like, why is it? What do they say is the reason why it's in the Quran?
Well, I'm unaware. Is the story of Jonah being swallowed by a fish in the Quran? I know that there's. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Alex Kalamli, but he's done a Quran Bible comparison. I know there's a story. I know that Jonah is mentioned, but I'm not too sure, or I'm familiar with what that is. But what I have found is that this is one of these trick questions they ask you, and they're totally even a person like Shabir, who is he's much more educated than I am. They're unaware of the context, and they're really unaware of the teaching of the New Testament. They really are. What we'll look at next time is basically 3 days and 3 nights, which is a bit more of a difficult question to answer, because when you go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you don't have 3 days and 3 nights. But like I'm going to speak from my experience, and everyone has a different experience. But when you get a lot of these type of questions, these guys don't want really an answer. They want to trap you. I think we need to be ready in answering it. But I think there's also, and I'm learning, I think there's also a time to walk away. I really do.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of Sirah Nabawiyah, Ibn Hisham, about the death of Muhammad. 3 days, and then finally they bury. And it's kind of coincidence or not that Jonah also swallowed by a whale for 3 days, and then he resurrected. I mean, he alive. And Jesus was on the belly of the earth for 3 days, and then he rose. But have you asked the Muslims, why is your prophet die in 3 days but never rose up again, and still die, while Jonah died in 3 days and then come back to life, and Jesus died in 3 days and rose again from the dead? Have you asked that question to them?
No, I'm unfamiliar with how long about the story about Muhammad. Again, the 3 days and the 3 nights, that's a bit of a different argument. I'll give you a bit of a, well, I don't think that the crucifixion occurred on a Friday. I think it occurred on a Wednesday. And I think I can, the next time that we do this, I think I can give you strong evidence for why that is so. But see, the classic Muslim belief is basically they hold to some type of substitute that, or mass illusion, that Jesus was not really put on the cross. He was taken up and rescued, and that somebody else, some think Judas, some think Simon of Cyrene do it. And a very good person to look at, and I don't know whether he's been on, is Samuel Green. He's written a lot about that.
I think another thing to bring up here is so if they say Jesus really didn't die on the cross, then how do they deal with the multiple places Jesus says that I'm going to be crucified and on the 3rd day rise again?
It's been corrupted, sister. It's been corrupted.
Yes, but yes, I know that they say that, but I still think it's a valid thing to challenge them with.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it is.
we can bring up the Islamic dilemma, but where are they even getting that? So how did Jesus die? But yeah, because there is that bringing in what Jesus said, his own prophecies of that he predicted he would die and rise in 3 days, and then he quoted this. And then I also think about bringing in the bigger topic, which was repentance. It was repentance both for Jonah, that the Ninevites repented, and then when Jesus quoted this scripture, he also talked about the whole purpose of why he said this is a sign of Jonah is he was pointing to repentance. Like the people of Jonah would accuse the modern generation because why they repented, this modern generation doesn't. So
Yeah.
I think there's several angles we can bring in here. Of course, in every single argument that it's going to be like, oh, Bible's corrupt, Bible's corrupt. But we have to sometimes move beyond that. I mean, we can bring up the Islamic dilemma, but we have to, I think, also not get stuck on that and challenge them with the rest of the truth of the scriptures.
Oh, I agree. And again, like a lot of the stuff you only have like, if you're sort of doing your evangelism and, and you only have 5 minutes with a person to talk. I try to, I think, and you're right. I think that as we look at Islam, I think the great thing is basically is they have such a low view of sin. Sin is just like, not doing very well on your math test.
I would also say that this idea that Jesus just swooned on the cross, he didn't really die. I know not all of them hold to that idea, but those that do, that's like the most absurd thing ever. I mean, logically, it makes no sense that Jesus would make his way, or he would survive the cross, make his way to the tomb, and then 3 days later walk out of that tomb. I mean, he would have needed medical attention immediately. And I think about the disciples. I mean, the disciples at one point are hiding behind closed doors, and the women discover the empty tomb. I would have left that part out as, one of the men, if this was a story I was making up. But this is what we find: the men hiding behind closed doors. But then after the resurrection, we find these same men become the greatest evangelists that the world has ever known. And it hardly makes sense to say that Jesus, in the terrible shape that he was, I mean, just try to think about removing somebody from the cross and what that would do to the body physically, just trying to take them off of the cross. So he would have needed medical attention, and it makes no sense that he would have motivated his disciples to go out and die as martyrs after that, as someone, telling his disciples that, someday you're going to have a resurrected body just like me. There was something different about Jesus. He had a glorified body, of course, but that idea just makes no sense to me at all.
Well, that can be a good argument, Olins, because in the Muslims they believe in miracles, and but they also don't believe that Jesus' death is a miracle. And I agree with you. Bring that question to the Muslims. Is there any medical miracle of experience? Somebody is hung on the cross, stay alive. Yeah. I never heard, or when I read his storybook, I never heard that anyone hung on the cross can survive death.
I think there's something in Josephus.
Yeah, I was going to say we only have one account.
Except there,
where someone was,
except for with the
survived.
Josephus account, in that story that Josephus tells, that man was only crucified. He didn't face the flogging. He didn't face the march to the cross. So he only he was a fresh body on the cross, versus Jesus went through a horrific flogging that we know from history almost regularly
Half
kills
death.
people. And then he had to, walk all the way up there. So it was a very different scenario for that one person who did survive that Josephus mentions.
It's very interesting what the scriptures say, that he yielded up his spirit. In other words, they didn't really actually kill him, but Jesus willingly, gave up his spirit. And none of us will do that when our time comes. Our life will be taken from us, but it really wasn't taken from Christ. He gave it up willingly. With that, that's something that I'm still trying to work through as far as the mystery, the mystery of it, that Jesus died at a very specific time, and that was basically connected with the temple sacrifice.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think when talking to people, just asking them specifically, why do you think Muhammad included this death in the Bible? And that it's such a big deal for him because all the prophets died, and a lot of them died really horrific deaths. Now we know on our side that it's there's spiritual battles involved in trying to deny the death of Christ. I mean, we could understand if someone went after the resurrection because that's such a supernatural event. But just to challenge him, why do you think Muhammad attacked the death of Christ? Why was that so important to him as opposed to all the other deaths? Yes, he was a more honorable prophet, but why not talk about these other deaths as well? Anyway, just something to think about.
Yeah, I think that in my understanding of Islam, one of the things that I think it is primary is basically to understand that Islam is nothing more than a polemic against Christianity. When you look at the core teachings of the Quran, they are denial of what the deity of Christ, right? The Trinity, the atonement, original sin, and the brain cramp. But and the crucifixion. That's very hard of, and the Quran is specifically attacks the core doctrines or the core tenets of Christianity, and therefore I think that, and I agree with you. I think there's something supernatural about Islam, and that it is its sole reason for existence is basically as an attack on the person and work of Christ.
Yeah. And I know we can kind of understand that, but I think it's also good to challenge them to think through that. Like, why do you think? Like, because we can look at the scriptures and see that everything that the scriptures stand for, the deity of Christ, the Trinity, the death, the resurrection, all these core essentials are what the very things Islam rebukes, and we understand that. But I think sometimes challenging them, putting them in the driver's seat can cause them to think a little bit about that. And why was this such a big issue? So I'm
Well,
not looking for I'm not looking for an answer. I'm saying that I think it's good that we challenge the people
yeah,
we're
I
talking
agree.
to.
One of the questions that when I go out with Clinton with visiting our Muslim friend is basically asking why did the Jews want to kill Jesus? What was the reason? And I think that the whole concept is found in John chapter 5, and basically is that when Jesus had healed the man on the Sabbath, and it says not only did they want to kill him because he healed somebody on the Sabbath, but he was making God his Father, making him calling God his Father, making himself equal with God. And later on, when Jesus claims to be the Son of God, is the Jew says, well, we have a law that he's calling himself the Son of God. And so I think that's one of the questions that we really need to start asking our Muslim friends is, why did the Jews want to kill Jesus?
Well, the other thing that we might want to ask a question to the Muslims is why are they denying the supernatural of Jesus' death, resurrected, and the rose, burial, and rose from the dead, and also returned to heaven? Maybe because there is no miracles, there is no miracle in Islam, no miracle performed by Muhammad. So that's something we can ask a question to the Muslims and let them think, because when they read the New Testament, especially in the four Gospels, there are so many supernatural, so many miracles. And even in the Old Testament, there's so many supernaturals, in the life of the believers. And how come there is no miracles performed by their God, Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad? That's something we can ask them. And also when they say, oh yeah, they split the moon, so they have to be able to prove it by NASA. There was an event that the moon was split, and what's happened with the moon split. So that's something. Questioning the Muslim is like helping them to think something that they cannot think. That's just my opinion.
Terrence, we
One thing is good to do is to make a comparison between Muhammad and Jesus, as a way of challenging Muslim friends. It's like, we know here that Jesus died and he rose after 3 days, and that's what the sign of Jonah is pointing to. Now, Muhammad, there was the expectation that when a prophet died, that his body wouldn't rot. But in fact, Muhammad said this in a hadith, if I am right. But I mean, what actually happened was in other hadiths that well, actually, maybe in Ibn Kathir mentions this, that after 3 days his body really smelled after he died, and was hanging around 3 days as they delayed his burial. It's a large contrast between Muhammad and Jesus, not to mention the fact that Muhammad is still in the ground and Jesus is in heaven reigning now. Sorry, Olin, you had something to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought maybe it would help if we could discuss some of the comments that are being made here, if you'd like. But
yeah,
whatever.
That'd be good.
So Radical Love says I think he means the statistics of the death by crucifixion far outweighs the survivors. There is just no reason to believe one could survive a full-blown crucifixion. Yeah, I would say that the Romans knew what they were doing when it come to killing people on the cross, and it was very obvious that somebody was dead when they were hanging on the cross. Somebody who dies by crucifixion dies by asphyxiation. So they're hanging on the cross, and when they're hanging by their arms, their lungs are stretched out in such a way that they cannot exhale. And so in order to breathe out, they had to push up with their legs. This is the reason they would break the legs to, kind of hurry up the process. They couldn't push back up to breathe out. So when the Bible says in the Gospel of Mark that Jesus breathed his last, it was very evident, because he's not moving up and down on the cross. He's just hanging by his arms. His head's fell over, and he's obviously not breathing. You don't fake that kind of thing. So Radical Love here makes a good point. Anybody else have any comments on that? I'll try to stay quiet on the next one.
Well, that was my point earlier.
Okay.
Helping the Muslims, questioning what they believe. I know some Muslims believe that Jesus survived, or Isa survived the crucifixion, or somebody survived the crucifixion. Now, my challenge to them is, show me a proof or any statistic in real life, anyone who survived the crucifixion, and then after 3 days, all the wounds heal completely. So they have to be able to show a proof. That's how I do every day, questioning the Muslims, help them to ask questions. Because I'm an ex-Muslim, we've been told that we are not allowed to ask a question. If we ask a question as a Muslim, you're already labeled as a kafirun, or unbeliever, and you're going to hell. So that fear is going through, until the adulthood, until somebody asks them question and help them questioning that question. So that's my big mouth, I
Well,
guess.
you've made you made an excellent point, and is that in Islam, again, from my experience and the little bit I've read, is that questions are verboten. I mean, they're really there's no critical thought in Islam, and they're unable to think outside the box. And I think some of the things that I've tried to get Muslims. I mean, obviously, we want to see Muslims come to Christ, but very often the first steps are to get them to examine their own presuppositions. And there is an inability and also an unwillingness to on them. And that's why I think this is so spiritual, and why they use this cop out basically, well, it's corrupted. When they're caught, it's always the Bible is corrupted. But the idea is that is we sort of have to get them to, they have to start questioning their own their own position on things. And I think that if someone has has a magic bullet for this, please let me know, because and again, I've been talking to Muslims who are who are well educated, and they like I say, they've had like a person like Shabir, and yet I don't think Shabir can there are certain presuppositions the Shabir will not question.
Right. Well, there is a verse in the Quran that does say, "Don't question anything, because you might lose your faith." It might cause you doubts, and you lose your faith. So, if you're steeped in the whole Muslim tradition, I can see why they don't want to question. But as a number of you have said, I think it's really important that we ask as many questions, like, why do you think that? Where does it say that? Here's the story in the Bible, here's the gospel, here's whatever, just even to put that little seed in their head, that that they might not agree with you at that point, but maybe 2 months or a year later, something will snap and they'll think, yeah, that doesn't make sense, and seek some more help, and maybe start talking to Christians a bit more.
That references Surah 5:101. It says, Allah basically says you don't ask questions. Some people before you did ask questions, and they left Islam. So again, I'm just echoing what everybody else has already said. If we don't ask Muslims questions, who is? They're not encouraged to think about. They're not encouraged to think critically about their own faith. And so just a simple question like, how did you reach that conclusion? How did you come to believe that? Why do you believe Jesus did not die on the cross? I mean, anything like that, I think the Holy Spirit uses it. So spot on.
Absolutely. We have another point and a question from a YouTube audience on veritology. It interested me that Michael O'Connor brought up Matthew 27:63-64, where the Jewish leaders want a guard for the tomb until the third day. Wouldn't that be the very day that they would need the guard?
I didn't hear that. question, or I misunderstood it. You're talking that that they didn't they didn't secure the tomb until the third day.
From the question, it looks like Matthew 27 is suggesting that the Jewish leaders stationed a guard at the tomb until the third day.
Okay.
And
so there was no opportunity for someone to come and steal the body.
Right.
And move that big heavy stone.
I think what they're saying is, like, there's a couple conversations about, is this an idiom or is this an actual until the third day? But one of the commenters said that the third day was the most responsible day where Jesus was to rise. And if there was no guards there, yeah, I see that as a valid question.
Well, we can talk about the third day. Like I say, Terrence, when do you want to do part 2 on this, basically on talking about the 3 days and the 3 nights?
Oh, yeah, we'll work out a time. But yeah, it's like because, this question is going to be
there is that I think the idiom argument. I think that's the weakest one. It was a literal 3 days and a literal 3 nights. That is, that I think that if we look at that in the text, that's quite obvious with that. And to work that out, but to answer that question fully, we would need about another half an hour or so to go through that. But
they're not asking about Jonah; they're asking about the guards, the presence of the guards. 3 days.
Well, I mean, they would have had guards sitting there. Were they the same guys? I mean, maybe they could have worked in shifts. Anyways, they were told, what was basically is when they found the body missing, says, well, we fell asleep and we'll bribe the governor not to, so you won't get in trouble.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have some robust discussion on this topic next time that we have you on the channel, Stephen. Sorry, Pastor Olin.
I was going to say, we know the tomb was empty. There's like 4+1 facts that Dr. Gary Habermas talks about. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those, but his minimal facts argument, where he talks about practically all scholars agree, not that, just because all scholars agree, that doesn't make it true. But they agree because the evidence is so overwhelming. That's his point. They agree that Jesus died by crucifixion, that his disciples believed that they encountered the risen Jesus 3 days later. You have Paul, the modern day terrorist of his time, who suddenly changed and dies as a martyr. You have James, the skeptic, who was the half brother of Jesus, who's changed. He doesn't become a believer until after the resurrection. So those 4 points are agreed upon by 99% of all scholars. Again, because the evidence is so overwhelming. But the 5th point is it doesn't enjoy quite as much scholarly consensus, but it's still way up there. I mean, even atheist, agnostic, and Jewish scholars will admit that the tomb was empty. So that's huge. I mean, that's a huge talking point with our Muslim friends. What happened? I mean, you have guards, you have enemy attestation. The scriptures admit that the tomb was empty. You have some archaeological evidence that comes out that backs up this fact as well. So when Muslims want to attack the deity, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the very things that define our faith, we can respond back with some very robust arguments, with some hard evidence, I think, to make them question what they're saying.
Well, I think the argument I like to use basically is in 1 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians 15.
Yes.
Where risen Jesus is seen by more than 500 witnesses, and then some of these people are named. and also basically is with Peter at Pentecost. And this has just happened very, just what, 4 weeks, 5 weeks after that, and the people there were witnesses to the fact of the crucifixion. So there's, so there's all this that's going on, with it. I think one of the things is that we really need to be familiar with our own scriptures, and very often, a lot of Christians aren't. They're tripped up by how many women came to the tomb, because we have different accounts in the Gospels about how many women were at the tomb, because they came in different ways, or different people or different women were named, not to fall into the trap, that only one came, only three came, or things like that. Well, Terrence, this will relate to you. I was in Minneapolis, and then Clinton says I was in Minneapolis. Well, but does that mean because I was in Minneapolis, Clinton wasn't in Minneapolis? Of course not. So I think that very often you'll get stuff like that from supposed biblical scholars.
Yeah, I was going to respond to the comment that was just up, Olin, that you just had about, if you want to put that one back up, about Josephus's friend. So what we know, it comes from the life of Flavius Josephus. It was during a time when Titus was there, and I'm reading the quote, the very quote that Josephus says, and he said, "I saw many captives crucified and remembered 3 of them as my former acquaintance. 2 of them died, and then the one lived." So this was a time where they didn't have time for flogging. They didn't have time for the traditional crucifixion process. They were just crucifying everybody. And we know from history that they crucified so many that they ran out of wood within, was it 14 kilometers of Jerusalem? So in this particular instance, again, I don't think that this person was flogging. We have no historical record of this person being flogged. It was just mass crucifixion anywhere and everywhere. And he even records he saw many people being crucified, 3 of whom he knew, and then 1 of them lived.
Yeah, imagine finding 3 of your friends crucified, and they were taken down immediately and given the best medical attention of their time. And like you said, there's no indication that they were flogged or anything. Still, 2 of them died. So crucifixion was a horrible, horrible way to die. I mean, they didn't even have a word to describe this method of killing somebody. They come up with the word excruciating, out of the cross, excruce. So that's a very, very good quote from Josephus there.
Yeah, you make an excellent point. And I think a question to ask Muslims, is considering what crucifixion was in the first century and what people thought about it, why would anybody talk about a crucified savior, a crucified prophet? And let's be a little bit graphic, ladies. We have you have a naked man on a cross. He's completely exposed. His genitals, his private parts are exposed. Why would, if this story wasn't true, why would anyone make up such a story?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it was humiliating to not just be crucified, it was shameful to be associated with someone who is crucified. And that's why Paul says, he embraces the shame of the cross and he's not afraid. So no one would make up that story, because that would be humiliating and embarrassing. And I was going to comment here, Michelle Cherie, KGV, in the comments said, this has to bear witness also with the Old Testament writings who prophesied crucifixion. So I encourage people to refer back to when I spoke on this last week, And by the way, if you need the PowerPoints for that, go to gracedfollower.com /Islam. And those PowerPoints are there where you can see all the quotes and all the prophecies, because it really comes down to, once again, we have overwhelming testimony to the cross of Christ. So if somebody's going to say this Jonah passage, it says he didn't die, then how does it fit with the historical testimony, the prophecies, the history, the eyewitness testimony, the apostles' death? There's just so much overwhelming testimony that it's just not congruent with everything we know about the death of Christ.
I want to highlight what Alisa said, that this is the big difference between Islam and Christianity. Okay, like you say, based on a historical, based on witnesses, based on archaeology, a true story. If you compare then Islam, we can even find the prophet, true Muhammad, who was born in Mecca with the mother named Amina, the father named Abdullah, or the uncle named Abdul Muttalib, and so on and so on and so on. You know, there is no archaeologist, there is no history, there is no witness of those stories. So much different in Christianity, and this is why, I have faith in Christianity, because it's based on something that when I visit, that's the tomb. When I visit Israel, that's the tomb. When I visit Jerusalem, that's the city of David. It's there to prove. This is something that you cannot lie about it.
I just wanted to say something else regarding about the in 1 Corinthians. This is in chapter 1, and I'm thinking it's maybe around verse 18, but it talks about, it uses the word foolishness and a stumbling block. That's what you have most of the English translations. And now I'm going to throw my little bit of Greek at you again. Basically, the word for a stumbling block is the word where we get the word scandal from. And if you look in the Greek dictionary, you can see see how close it is to the word we get scandal, and foolishness is where we get the word moron from, or moronic madness. And I think that there's a book out by Martin Hingo on the crucifixion. Is really like it's not a very large book, but it's a pretty tough slog, because it's written for academics, and I was able to get through part of it. But he talks about, again, what the view of crucifixion was in the first century but by all societies, and my sister here was talking about, it was just the action, the worst type of death. I mean, the most humiliating thing, to do to a person that you could possibly do. There was nothing worse than that. It was, as our sister said, shameful. It was a shame.
I kind of liken the sign of Jonah, what we're talking about here today, to almost like, so Jonah is thrown, or he's in the whale for 3 days. Now, he's simply a man, so he's not going to die, and he's not. I mean, that's bad enough to be swallowed by a whale, but he's as good as dead when he's
yes, exactly.
Exactly, as good as dead. And then God resurrects him. He then saves him. So really, it truly is a prefiguring, a forecast of the crucifixion, because Jonah is only a man. So you can't compare him to what Jesus actually did on the cross, because he was only a man. And so it's enough that he was as good as dead for those 3 days. Yahweh saved him, and and that's foretelling what is going to happen.
That's exactly the point. So,
Yeah.
like I say, I believe that he actually suffered physical death, but it doesn't matter because you're exactly right. Is that language is he was as good as dead.
Yeah.
There's no escape. You go down there, and if you're dead, you're not coming back. I'm sorry, no, when you go, sister, when I go, I'm not coming back. It's a permanent state, and yet he comes back. And
Right.
Christ came back. He did not, Muslims say, oh, he didn't suffer the pangs of death. No, death didn't have a hold on him. And Christ was resurrected. So again, it shows it really shows a lack of the knowledge of the scriptures and how the ancients viewed the the world there. Time to. Are you telling me to shut up, Terrence?
Oh no! Please finish what you're saying.
No, I'm finished actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to
Yeah.
make sure whatever we have here, we can use it to discuss it with Muslims and minister to them. It might not be the whole thing, but at least a part of it we can discuss it with Muslims.
Well, we'll do the part. We'll do the 3 days and the 3 nights next. Whenever we can, and I would love to do it because, like I say, I find that really fascinating. And again, it's looking at it a little bit differently than our traditions. Our traditional view of a Friday crucifixion.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Yeah. It's about time for us to wrap up our discussion.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stephen, you did a great job, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. I was more than happy to be able to do it, and it was great. It'll be great to get to know you all. So, what's going on next week, Olin? Who are you going to?
That's a good question, and one that only George knows. So, George
Yeah.
knows, and you know not.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I want
stay-
more than
stay tuned.
I want more than 2 hours notice about this next time.
Absolutely. That will be a guarantee. Yeah. How can we get?
Oh, we lost
Okay,
Terrence. You froze for just a minute, brother. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I might have a slightly sketchy internet connection right where I am. But yeah. Stephen, how can we get in touch with you?
Oh,
People want to ask more questions.
should I give you my email address?
Yeah, don't give a personal one. I wouldn't, but if you want in the private chat, maybe.
Okay, yeah.
Just put that in the private. You don't want that on the
I think
internet.
Yeah.
Terrence, contact me through Facebook.
Okay. People can find you on Facebook.
And I'll send you an email address or something. We'll arrange something that way. Okay.
Or they can submit their questions on the Ministry to Muslims website.
Yeah.
And we'll get them to you.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. It was great to have you join us here, Ministry to Muslims. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel to look at lots of other content on how to reach Muslims with the gospel, and also don't forget to visit the Ministry to Muslims website and check out the resources there and the conferences and other events that are going to be coming up over the next year. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Blessings.